Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. As all three of you have done, the purpose of this committee is to make recommendations on the type of evaluation criteria to be used for the allocation of federal funding through the tri-agencies. As one of the members of this committee who was here in the previous Parliament when we studied this question, we heard a number of ideas. Dr. Cobey, you mentioned the publish or perish imperative. One of the ideas we heard was that perhaps applications should be completely blinded as to who the proponent is. In other words, that would remove that potential bias, and simply the evaluation would be done on the quality of the proposal. That would perhaps be part of a stepwise review of the application. In other words, once various proposals were considered excellent, that they could then proceed to perhaps more evaluation of the team, and perhaps, since we're so interested in the whole DEI evaluation criteria, perhaps that could be part of the second step and might relate to training of researchers, etc. So I'd like some of your comments, sort of in a very practical way, as to see how you could remove some of the potential biases that have existed really institutionally for a long time.
Thank you for your question. Through you, Madam Chair. I think you point at issues or shifts in the potential way peer review is done at grant panels, and I would agree with your suggestion. I think the idea of having blinded peer review at these committees could help to address some of these sort of issues and selecting for excellence, and then a second phase where perhaps it's not blinded. I would encourage the committee to consider making peer review more open, generally speaking. So while we may have blinded peer review initially, at the end phase of once selection is done, I think it would be of extreme value to sort of open up the black box that is the peer review process in this country for federal funding and make those peer review reports available as open as possible. Sometimes there's sort of trade secrets or things that need to be closed. But I think for me, in order to improve the system, we need to know how the system is working, and we need to do active research or meta-research on peer review to improve it. So we don't want to, go from one system that's clearly not working to another system that we think might be working better, but don't actually have the evidence. So as a researcher, I think we need research, meta-research, to show that, the movements or goals for how we'd like to change peer review and select for excellence are actually being changed and achieved. Right now, across the board, I would say there's very little implementation monitoring of our policies and practices.
So thank you for that. And perhaps you could, since you've raised it yet again, the whole issue of grant monitoring. How do you see that happening? Would the original peer review assessment team have sort of a role in that? Would there be a sort of time frame, a sort of let's take a look at where they're at? It seems like a lot of extra work. So could you try and convince me that it would be really useful to have that piece?
Absolutely. So right now in Canada, once you get funding, there's essentially no monitoring until your final report for the vast majority of grants. And so in other jurisdictions, there are grants officers assigned to funded projects to ensure that certain milestones are met and that overall outputs are delivered upon. So I'll use from my area of expertise the concept of open science. So for instance, with clinical trials, we have federal policy to ensure that these trials are registered prospectively in an appropriate registry. We know that we're not doing that for meta research. So, we have a policy and we need to monitor that when we do fund a trial, that those trials are indeed getting registered and that subsequently the results are being reported fully and completely. We know from an audit that we've done that about half of trials conducted in this country never see the light of day in terms of having their results reported in a public registry or even in a peer-reviewed publication. So I think that's suggests inefficiency, and we want to make sure that there's monitoring there to make sure some of these basic science policies, which we have, our science policies I think are quite strong and getting stronger, but it's that they're being implemented on the ground.
Thank you. And perhaps in the remaining time, Dr. Karram wanted to give us a little bit more on DEI, so perhaps this would be an opportunity for her to contribute.
Thank you so much. I think we see this polarization that assumes that there's a woke community on one side and then others who are feeling shut down on the other side. And we really have to nuance that, because if we're looking at trying to change our labor market inefficiencies, we have to remember that we have a large number of recent Canadians, of groups of students that are in graduate school, are soon to be our main researchers, our early career researchers, and they come from a rich wealth of communities that have cultural, religious heritages. They also see themselves as apart from the woke community, but they're not the top tier researchers who are saying we have to just pick based on merit. I hope I can begin to point out the differences between these groups and say that if we include EDI in an effective way, we actually bring all of those new researchers into the Canadian landscape of research production, making sure that we actually have the best talent from around the world that has chosen to live in Canada doing research. So we cannot throw EDI out in this myth that we're not choosing the best research, because of the groups of recent Canadians that are highly educated and that need to get into our labor market.